If you all would hold on for those who are coming on and watching this later, we're going to pause for a minute and let some people get in on this particular chat and this particular video. So we're going to be talking about prayer circles a little bit and talking about why it's good once you come into the understanding why it's good not to be a part of prayer circles and things of that nature. So we'll talk a little bit about it, and also there's I want to tell you about a conversation that I had this week in reference to prayer circles, which I really did appreciate. So we'll wait and let some people get on. Hey, what's going on, Brother Eugene? What's going on, Mr. Springfield? John Springfield, we're going to have a class about QuickBooks and stuff like that that's going to be coming up here in the future. So if you want to be a part of that, let me know. I know in a lot of, well, we'll talk about it. I'll talk about it later on another thing, but yeah, we're going to be doing the QuickBooks thing, so, and learning how to do that. So I'll talk to you later about it whenever you get a chance. Hey, shalom, brother. How you doing? Yakir, shalom to you. Man, don't call me a teacher. I'm call me brother. That's good enough. I don't get into them titles whatsoever, but I do appreciate the respect though. But shalom to you. So we're gonna be talking about, again, I said it for the beginning in case people came on later and watched it. We're going to talk about the prayer circles a little bit, and we're going to talk about why it's not a good idea to hold hands and be in a circle during prayer. And I'm going to give a scripture as to why. And we're also going to talk about the way of thought as to why we shouldn't do that. Hey, what's going on, Craig? How you doing? So hopefully we're not going to take too long on this because I know it's getting late in the evening. So in this, we just came into the Sabbath a couple of hours ago. So, you know, everybody's out there watching videos and stuff like that. So I'm in the room doing this. So I'll try not to make it too long. But I'll give, how you doing, Mr. Matcham? I'll give just a couple of more minutes, if you can bear with it, just a couple of more minutes and let some other people sign on, and we'll go into just the thinking behind the prayer circle. Had a conversation, how you doing, Ms. Cox? Had a conversation with a person this week in reference to the article that I posted about hey, what's it say? Come out of her, my people. That's a true statement, brother. Come out of her. That's exactly what it says. So let's, as a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and get into it. So people who want to watch it later can come back and watch later. So I wanted to clarify an article that I put up this week. And hey, cousin Lisa, how you doing? But I wanted to clarify an article that I put up this week. We was talking about prayer circles. And, you know, it's a pretty good article. You know, it is written by a man. No doubt it's been written by a man. And in this guy's study, he found that nowhere is it really talked about in prayer, in the scripture, about prayer circles, and nowhere is it really talked about holding hands, you know, in prayer or prayer circle. So, hey, Sister Kathy Lee, how you doing? But nowhere is it written in Scripture to do that. So this week, a lady called me, well, got a hold of me, and she had, I wouldn't say an argument for it, but she basically, I appreciate her for getting a hold of me and telling me. She says, I listen to a lot of things that you say, and you're right on. She says, but on this one, I have to disagree with you, and I thank her for that, because she went back and actually read the articles that I posted about prayer circles. She went back and read them, and she did her own research about it. She was very respectful when she was talking to me. She clearly explained her thoughts, what she thought about it, and she took me to the side, and that's what I appreciate too. When instead of trying to debate someone openly and publicly, which I don't get into debates, because my thought is this: if somebody doesn't see something, it may not be their time to even see it. So if it's not their time to see it, you can't force that on somebody. Okay, so I don't get into a debate if they just clearly don't understand it. I don't push that. But I was very excited because she did go and do her research. She made valid points. Some of her points was, nowhere in Scripture does it talk about holding hands. It talks 2 verses about it, but it's not in a good way. And also, she said that it made no valid points in Scripture. There were no Scripture talking about a circle, about believers praying in a circle. And I appreciated that one too. I definitely know that there is no Scripture in the Bible about praying in circles. Okay, so I was impressed because she did her own research and she found no scriptural basis. So she comes to me, talks to me, we're talking, and I'm like, hey, I respect your thought, I respect your view, but we're going to go a little deeper into the prayer circle tonight, because there may be some people out there who feel the exact same way. Why are you talking about prayer circles? We used to get up in church when we were younger, and we used to line up around the church, and we used to pray, and I remember those. I remember all of those things that we used to do when we were younger. And so we have the memories of it, when they used to have the altar call, and used to hold hands and be in a circle. But if we don't have the understanding of where it comes from, then we wind up doing things without knowing the history of doing those things. And we don't understand why we are doing those things. We're doing it because it was actually shown us to do it when we were growing up. So it becomes, sorry about that, I got something on my screen. It becomes a part of our conscience. It becomes a part of the way that we act and the way in which we do things. So I chose to listen to the Spirit because I've been doing this for a while, and I have seen a lot of things. Again, like I said, I didn't debate her because she did her research, and I was pretty impressed with her. So let me just tell you a little bit, and I can't even go into this all the way because this is on Facebook and it is being recorded. And if I tell where I was and what I was doing, then those who were involved will know that. So I'm going to say it like this, and it's from my past profession. Many of you all know I was a police officer. So after I graduated from this particular thing that I was doing, we were taken downstairs to the bottom of a building. And when we were at the bottom of the building after this training, it was training what it was. We were taken downstairs and the lights were turned off and candles were lit. Now, mind you, I had no idea about this. No idea about any kind of occult thing whatsoever at that time in my life. And this was about 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago. So I had no idea what was going on. So, proceeded, and they had this little ceremony. People were holding candles, and they bought this red yarn out. And, we all gathered, and it was kind of like a circle. Actually, it was, because the instructors was on one side of us, and we were lined up in kind of like a semicircle. So I didn't really know what was going on. I was just like, this is some strange little ceremony they got going on. Well, during this time, they start passing out some red yarn. And they would take this red yarn, and they would wrap it around our wrists. Then they would go to the next person and wrap it around their wrist. And then they would go to the next person, wrap it around their wrist. Now, they're telling us that we're to look at this yarn. We're supposed to tie it up on our wrist and leave it there for a year. And it was supposed to help us remember the class that we had just taken, and to remember those who were taking the class together. And while we were doing our instructing, we would look at that yarn. Well, come to find out, anyway, so the ceremony continues. It continues in the dark, continues with the candles going. And during that time, I'm starting to feel uneasy. I'm like, kind of like, why are we got the lights off? And what are we exactly doing? So over a period of time, I saw I think it was Madonna, maybe. Madonna, and there was a governor one time, and he was talking, and he had a red yarn around his wrist. And I was like, man, that looks like the thing that I'm wearing, or that I wore. And come to find out, that is a part of Kabbalah. And what was actually kind of being done, if you technically look at it, was kind of like a seance. Now, this was in my professional profession, and should have had nothing to do with what I was doing. But little did I know that it was a Kabbalah ceremony, and I had no idea. And so that's how I kind of started beginning to come into understanding that some of these rituals that go on, some of these rituals that take place, and the coming together and holding hands in a circle. So let me tell you a little bit from there on. Well, anyway, let me more closely explain why I believe that the early believers did not do prayer circles. So let's move away from our Western mindset, our Western way of thinking, the way that we were given when we came to this country. We were brought to the West, and so we adopted the Western way of thinking, okay? And so when you look at the scripture, you can't look at it from the Western way of thinking. You have to look at the scripture from a more biblical Eastern way of thinking, I call it a Hebraic thinking, because the Bible was written in Hebrew. The people who worship the Most High were Hebrews, and that's where the Bible was written. And the Romans came back and started doing some translating later on. But to have the biblical mindset, you have to have a Hebraic way of thinking to understand the scripture. Okay, so Israel was given a command by the Most High. It was a commandment by the Most High that was given to Israel, and I'm going to read that towards the end, and I'm going to show you why they probably did not do what we see being done in churches today, which is holding hands. So we're going to just look at a couple of things. I don't know if you all have access to a computer. Maybe you're watching this on your computer, or maybe you can watch on your phone. Maybe you can go to Google and Google some things, but you can go back and do it on your time. And you can also go to my page on that article about prayer circles. You can go down, and I posted up a bunch of photos about prayer circles. Okay. And these prayer circles, let me give you some examples. How about Stonehenge? Stonehenge was a religious place of worship. And I believe it was a religious place of worship by the fallen as well. When you see those big stones, how did those big stones get there back during that time? So a circle is the way that the wicked, the Satan worshipers, worship their mighty one. They get into a circle to worship him, and they hold hands. Okay, so you can go look up on you can go and Google Stonehenge. You'll see the circle set up. Wiccan witches, or witches don't have to just be Wiccans. Witches actually get into a circle on every Halloween, and they do it in Asheville, North Carolina. And the reason we know this is because we went to Asheville, North Carolina, and we had some friends there, and they told us that that was the hub. They believed that that was the most sacred energy spot on the East Coast, was Asheville. And the witches would come there every Halloween, hold hands, get into a big circle, and dance around, and they would pray to their mighty one, which is Lucifer, basically what it comes down to. So once again, you see another wicked entity or faction in a circle praying to their deity. Yeah, it was erect in a circular stone for, exactly right, brother, exactly right. So you have the Wiccans. Okay, so now you have warlocks. Warlocks are simply male witches. You have warlocks. They get into a circle, and I posted a photo of of what they look like when they do it. They get into a circle and they do their prayers and their whatever all they do it in a circle. When you look at the Baphomet, I know a lot of people may not know what Baphomet is, but if you go and type in Baphomet in Google and go to images, you will pull up a goat head. Okay, so this goat head, and you will see a lot of times it's within a circle. This is the a lot of the Freemasonry and all this stuff. When you look at the women Eastern Stars. So you have Freemasonry, Prince Hall Freemasonry amongst African Americans, and you see the Eastern Stars. If you look at their symbol on the Eastern Star, it is the star turned up on its tip. It is the goat head. So we have to be very careful when we do things. And see, we do things without having any understanding of why we do what we do. So if we grow up with it and we see it, we tend to think that it's okay. But if we don't know the history back behind it, we have no idea. Okay, another thing, that seances. Seances, when they do seances, they sit in a circle, hold hands, and do their seance. Okay, they do their praying. They're actually conjuring up demons or spirits. Ouija board. When a Ouija board is being played, you sit around the Ouija board. Okay, all of this has to do with energy. All of it has to do with energy. Okay, so I've talked about the Halloween. How about Magic Circle? Write that down. Get on Google. Let me tell you what. I in some way despise the internet. But the day and time in which we live, we have no excuse about being ignorant, because we can find out all the information we want to find out on the internet. So if you go in and you type up Magic Circle, you'll see that it's a circle that is used. And in this circle, it's like an energy portal. Okay, it's what the witches do. It's what the warlocks do. It's what a lot of the pagans, the heathenistic religions, they worship their deity by way of circle. So should we, as children of the Most High, be getting into a circle, holding hands, praying to our mighty one, if that is what the wicked does? So the articles that I put up, yes, you are not going to find any scripture that's telling you about prayer circles. None. There's a reason for that. It's because they didn't do it. Number two, You're not going to hardly find any scriptures about holding hands during and praying. I think the scriptures that's in those articles are talking about when the wicked get together and they hold hands and do their plot. That was my understanding of it. There's 2 scriptures on that, but other than that, there's no other scripture in the Bible about that. All right. So why wouldn't there be any other scriptures about that? Okay. Now, this is where we put our Hebraic mindset, our biblical mindset on. So we say to ourselves, okay, so if it's the Western way of thinking is, well, if it's not in the scripture, that doesn't mean we can't do it. If it doesn't say we can't pray in a circle, then it means it's okay. If it doesn't say not to hold hands while we're praying in a circle, that means it's okay. No, let's look at the Hebraic way of thinking, the thought process from the Hebraic side. Okay, so I'm going to read to you the scripture, and let's read Deuteronomy chapter 12, and I'm going to start in 28 through verse 32. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 28 through 32. And I'll give you a second to get there. This is the reason why you will not see any type of circle prayer or circle anything. Because see, the circle is a old thing. It's not something that's just new come lately. Yeah, the churches are doing it. It's a new come lately thing in the churches. But before that, where did it originate? Where did these circles come from? And people worshiping their false gods, their Satan, basically. You see, that's the way that he is worshipped by people. Okay, so let's look at Deuteronomy, and we're going to look at verse 28, and we're going to read through verse 32. So he's telling Israel, he's saying, guard and obey all these words which I command you, that it might be well with you and your children after you forever, when you do what is good and right in the eyes of Yahuwah, your Elohim. So he's saying guard and do all that I have commanded you to do, because there were other laws, there were other statutes that he had given them previously. Like, for example, have nothing to do with a sorcerer. Stone them. Don't listen to them. Basically is what he was saying about these sorcerers. Well, why is that? Because they were doing some of these things that you see being done today. And they could not live amongst the children of Israel doing those types of things. So that's why he said, get rid of the witches. Get rid of the sorcerers. They are not to dwell amongst you. All right. So let's continue verse 29. When Yahuwah your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations which you go and dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, he says, guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their mighty ones, saying, how did these nations serve their mighty ones? And let me do so too. Now let's break that particular part down. Now, of course, we're not going and looking for these nations to see what they're doing. You see, this stuff was already in the nation that we're at. And this stuff was already being done in this nation. So we grew up under it. We didn't come from the outside and say, hey, what are they doing? I want to delve into that. No, it was already here. And growing up as children, we were doing these things. Yes, sir. Olympic rings. They were doing these things, and we grew up under it. So it became just a natural thing for us. So we didn't go looking for it. It like fell on us. Okay, so that's the difference. We aren't going looking for it. I'm sure that churches are not saying, hey, let's go see how the witches serve their mighty ones and let's incorporate that in our church. I'm sure that no pastor is doing that whatsoever. But I know that it is spreading, and it has spread throughout the religious institutions. Okay, so it's done to us. Now we have to go back and look and find out where these things come from and what was the scripture that the Most High told us not to do. So let's keep going in verse 31. This is a big one. Do not do so to Yah, your Elohim, for every abomination which Yah hates, they have done to their mighty ones, for they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. All these words I am commanding you to guard. See that word, some of you all's translations are going to say keep. When you look at the word keep, it means like you got to keep it. But the true word that should be used there, see, we can play on words to make you think it's not as important. When you guard something, you love it. When you guard something, you protect it with your life at all costs. That's guarding. Okay, so there's a difference between keeping. Keeping means I got to do this. Guarding means, oh no, I'm going to do this because I'm going to make sure this doesn't get affected. All right. So he had already given them commandments to guard, not to do as these other nations are doing. Now, in this nation, there are a plethora of nations. And in this plethora of nations, many people are doing many things. We know that they're doing witchcraft. We know that they're in sorcery. We know that they're doing all these things. Halloween, we know the witches are getting together. It's their night. They're having their bonfires. They're dancing around in the circle and putting a bonfire in them. We know that they're doing these things. We know that the Satanists get together and that they're in their circles holding hands. We know those things. Okay, so once we come into the understanding that that's how they worship their mighty ones, we are supposed to back away. Okay, I'm holding hands and I'm in a circle right now. See, for some of you who see this later on, you're going to start looking when you start holding hands and in a circle. It's going to start hitting you in your head and being like, oh, hold on, we talked about this. We're in a circle right now. Is this right? So just be very, very careful when you get involved in those things. Other nations, other peoples worship their deities that way. We cannot bring that worship into our place. Okay? I can go a whole lot deeper into that. But anyway, the circle is a big deal. Now, I'm going to say something probably right now that might be a little tough to hear. If you go into the new 1828 Webster's Dictionary app, and see, I've known this for years, but now I notice that they've changed it. So if you go into the new Webster's 1828 Webster's Dictionary app and you type in the word church, things have been changed. So we all should be wondering ourselves, well, why were they called the assembly or the congregation in the Old Testament? And then when the Messiah was going around preaching, they were called the assembly of the congregation. And then after the Messiah leaves, they're called the church. Like that's some new word in the Bible. It's really saying ecclesia if you're going to talk about the Romans. Ecclesia. As a matter of fact, let me give you that information on the word ecclesia. Okay, ecclesia is the Greek word in the Strong's Concordance, G1577. It means a calling out. That's what ecclesia or ecclesia means. It means a calling out. So we're calling out the spiritual from the unspiritual. We're calling out the righteous from the unrighteous. And the Hebrew word Adah, or E-D-A-H, or A-D-A-H, however you want to spell it. The Hebrew word for that is H5712. H5712. And that simply means assembly or congregation. Okay, so all through the scripture, the children of Israel was called the assembly or the congregation. You come into the Messiah's books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. All of those through there were known as the assembly. But then you get into the book of Acts and it changes. They are now called the church. If you look that word up, it'll take you back to the assembly or the ecclesia, the called out. Okay, so where did this word church come from? So in the 1828 app, in the new dictionary now, it says something totally different from what I'm getting ready to read to you. Okay. Now I'm in the 1828. I got the older book. So I think I've showed this before. 1828. Okay. Let me read the word church for you. Remember, we talked about the word circle. All right. Okay. Church. The first word is Circe. Circe is a Roman goddess. She was the goddess that would turn men into swine, turn them into different animals. She is where we get the word circus from. She's where we get the word circumference, circle, anything like that. That word originates from Circe. That's how we would say it in English. So Circe, Circe or Cyric, or in the German way of saying it, Kirk. So they're called, it's not called churches in Germany, it's called Kirches or Kirches or Kirches, which retains the Saxon pronunciation of Kirk, Kirche, or Kirke, which is Kirke. So we see that the word church derived from the word Circe or Kirky. Let's see, true and or saints, I believe, but now they call church members saints, even though they're right. Israel, the saints are Israel. That's where the saints come from. Saints are Israel. There was never called church back then. As a matter of fact, the early believers did not want to be even called Christian, because that name Christian means idiot. So that's why you got to go back and look at these English words, because these English words are horrible. They do things. So anyway, back to the church. The Most High would not ever call his assembly a church, because he would be calling them after a false deity by the name of Circe or Kirche or Kirky. So you see how they played on it. But now you get the newer 1928. That's why you always go for the older books, because they tell you the truth. The newer books start to change the lies on you. They don't want you to learn and to know the truth. So they start to change it and make lies and take out the truth back behind it. So get you the older the dictionary, the better. The older it is, the more truth you're going to get from it. Today, these dictionaries just put you to sleep. They don't give you the real information. So yes, go back and look up the word church and look up the word Circe. You'll find all kind of studies on that. So we know that the Most High, he deals with Israel. That's who he always talks about in the scripture. He talks about nobody else in the scripture. So I just think that we have to really be careful when we see the things that are going on in this world. And true, we may not find scripture supporting those particular things, but when the Most High starts explaining it to you, and we got people, we don't need to get in debates over it. Listen, Apollo plants, Paul waters, and we can say anybody, but we know that the increase comes from the Most High. So people may not be ready yet to receive some of the information that they're receiving because they're not ready. But there's going to come a day when people are ready to receive and learn the truth. They're not going to just look at it from a religious standpoint in which they got it. They're actually going to start delving into the word. And the only way that comes about is getting into the first part of the book. Because when you read the first part of the book, you know that the rest of it isn't right. So anyway, like I said, I got all kind of photos up to prove it. I want to tell y'all about this book that's even more so telling. There's this book called The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. It says praying circles around your biggest dreams and greatest fears. You see what I'm talking about? That's right, 2,000 times. So praying circles around your biggest dreams and greatest fears. So you see how it comes about where we start using this circle stuff to start bringing it into our worship with the Most High, when we all know that the star with the circle around it, we know that those are used for seances and for casting spells and all of those things. So just my warning is to just be very careful in circles. For me, we know when we're around people, and it happens all the time, when we're around people and they say, hey, everybody hold hands, let's get in a circle, my family automatically knows somebody's going to break the circle. We're not going to hold hands. Or if we hold in hands, we're not going to connect that circle, or we're going to bend that loop. We're not going to do this. We're going to open that thing up. So just be very careful and about these whole prayer circle things, because they haven't always been around. It's kind of almost like a new thing within the last 30 years or so. And now they've got all kind of, you could just type in prayer circle. You'll see all kind of Christian organizations popping up. Once you Google that, you'll see it's rampant in it. So, but if you don't have the understanding of how people worship their mighty ones and their deities, then you'll never understand that it's not good to do that. So, sorry to keep you, but it's been 35 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and end it right here. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about, I know we're not meeting as an assembly tomorrow. We're going to stay in our homes. But so tomorrow, what we're going to do is stay in our homes, and I am going to do a lesson because I know the assembly's heard this before, but we're going to talk about what is sin. And I feel like that there needs to be a bridge between the believers today who call themselves Christians and when people come into the truth. So I feel like there has to be a bridge that they have to walk across to start understanding that it's not all as it seems that we have been taught. Okay, so that's what we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to do that at same time at 1:30, because that's what everybody's used to. And we're going to talk about what sin is to kind of help people understand why it's important to have the understanding of sin. And it's basically not keeping the commandments. So I'll see you all tomorrow for those of you all who show up. If not, I'll see you all again. What time? It's going to be at 1:30. So some of this is just popping up. So if I'm doing it late, it's because it's just showing up on my screen. So at 1:30 tomorrow, we will be discussing what is sin. So I hope y'all have a good night. Love you all. Thank y'all for joining in. And thank y'all, Tony. You're funny, man. So I'll see you all tomorrow. And you all have a good night. Enjoy your Sabbath. Shalom.